That does conclude the public comments portion of the meeting. And again, I will say for those of you who are not regulars that it can feel very awkward that you're here to, it's pretty much one way addressing the board, but we appreciate your coming to talk to us about your topics. So thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on any of the items on the agenda, on the consent agenda?
I think I indicated that this needed to be a separate item previously. I'd like to pull off C9.
The board members receive all of the information in your, is it via email or via board briefing? Everyone received that?
But I can't remember where.
Okay.
I think it was in the.
Okay. Right, so Cindy will work on that. Any other questions on any of the other agenda items? Other than consent agenda?
I want to talk about discuss the enrollment demographic task form applications that we received.
That's what Don asked that we.
Oh, yes, that was.
No, I believe I asked for C9 to be pulled off.
C9 is a collective bargaining agreement.
I'm
in
sorry,
Neopa.
it's number 9 on mine is. I'm sorry.
And C10, there, because of the, there was a switch, I think, yeah. And then C10 is enrollment demographics.
We just take them both off and discuss them.
Did you have questions that can be resolved without taking it off, or does it need to come off the consent agenda?
I just maybe you want to get the consent agenda and we can, whatever you think's better. Let's take it off.
So we have the minutes, the payment of bills, and the personnel report remaining on the consent agenda. Are there any discussion on those three items? Right. It's been moved and seconded, and we will call for a vote, please.
We'll just John Lemay.
Sure. There we go.
Okay, and those three consent agenda items pass unanimously. They show up still, the other ones show up still on your screen, but that will come off and be addressed now because there are no other action items on the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is the collective bargaining agreement between North Shore School District and the North Shore Educational Office Professionals Association, NEOPA. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we'll open it up for discussion.
I asked for this to be pulled off in exec session, and so I asked for it again. As I indicated, I won't be supporting this contract because we're using MSOC money. I think it's consistent with my disappointment over the fact that when the state funds something, we choose to use it for salaries. I realize that that's going on across the districts in the whole state, but it's inappropriate, and the fact that it continues creates greater and greater discrepancy between pay between the districts. So I'll be voting no on this evening.
Any other discussion on this item? No? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All right, that passes 4-1. Next item on the agenda is the Enrollment Demographics Task Force member appointees. Is there a motion to approve?
Go ahead.
Second.
I don't know, one of us
I heard
moved and one
a
of us
motion, so we'll try that again. Is there a motion
So
to
moved.
approve?
Second.
All right, thank you. And discussion on this item.
So I wanted to know, Amy, were you able to look over, where we left it, I believe, last time, was you were going to look over the applications. And then I saw on the only thing that I saw was I did see the applications with all the names and the times that they were interviewed. And I just saw the same 3 people were up there.
So there was also a map. Did you get the map?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it was in last week's board briefing, I put together a little summary. So I reviewed all the applications and the map, and then I was able to have a conference call with Ryan and Doug to talk to them about the information they got from the interviews they conducted. So based on that information, and I brought my notes too if you want me to get into it, but the criteria I was looking at is primarily geographic, you know, because of where Kara Roth and Katrina Rose lived. You know, sitting in on the EDTF meetings over these months, I can see that it is very helpful to have a geographic dispersal.
Where did they live?
So they lived, Kara Roth lived down in the Hollywood Hill area, where Russ Bowman's from, and then Katrina was from the Inglemore feeder pattern, I think over by Arrowhead? I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, but she was from the Inglemore feeder pattern. So those were the 2 things I looked at. Russ was the only person from South Woodinville whose application was in. And he was a strong candidate, so that was pretty simple and straightforward. In terms of Inglemore, it was the 2, it was Tiffany Frayne and John Whiting. And John, he already serves on the elementary grade reconfiguration task force. And then I asked about Tiffany working in the district as well, and she's a counselor. And so this is what I thought was interesting. She's a counselor at Timbercrest, and she has a practice where she does consulting on conflict resolution, which I thought would also give her good experience working with a large committee. And again, for me, it resonated the fact that she had lived in other fast-growing areas of the country. So that's why I chose her for the Inglemore feeder pattern. And then I agreed, after talking with Ryan and Doug, that Eric Tingelstad, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, was just a pretty opportune application because he works in Cascadia and works on their equivalent of the EDTF, that it's a great networking opportunity for our district to have to work with a higher ed peer that's doing the same kind of work. And so I went through an evaluation process but ended up with the same names at the end.
I appreciate your work on that. And but I am going to be voting no on this, and the reason is because of what I had spoke to last meeting, and maybe we can change this for the next time that there's an appointment. But I think that is it not Tina but Tiffany. Like you said, I would agree with you that her qualifications look great. So there's no reason, I want to get this on the record, there's no reason about her personally or any of her qualifications that I'm voting no. So the reason being is because she works for the district, and my understanding of these positions is that they're parents that should be appointed or community members, and I feel there's a conflict of interest, whether she's a counselor. It looks like she has great, background. I saw some other people that live in these areas, and I understand that Tiffany lives close to Russ, it looks like, and then we're taking Eric, I believe it was, who's in the Bothell High, so that was kind of irrelevant to, it seemed to me, wasn't in line with the parameters we were putting on it. And Tina Williams I looked at her application, and she seemed to be a good candidate because she lives in that same area also, according to what I've heard. And so I do think, what I'm trying to say is I think that there were other options. And Tina's actually a civil engineer and has some other great qualifications. So,
unfortunately, Tina is up in the North Creek feeder pattern.
She's by Eric, I see.
Well, she's north. Her little white pin is right there on the corner.
Oh, in the corner.
Where Eric is down there. And again, through the conference call I was able to have, so the current members, Paul Flatness and Carrie Olstead, over here, they're on their last year also. And so, because I asked about that, about the duplication within the Ballville feeder pattern. But because, again, I felt with this experience and also to have some continuity in that feeder pattern would be advantageous. And also Russ is over in Woodinville. Tiffany is definitely, her pin's right there, she's definitely well within the Inglemoor feeder pattern. But I appreciate what you have to say. I mean,
So's Russ, I think.
no, his pin's over here. His
He's
children went through
I'm
Hollywood
sorry.
Hill.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yeah. So.
So I do appreciate you looking at this, so I'm not, this isn't to say that you didn't do a good job looking at this either, but I think that parent and community representatives should be parent and community representatives, and sorry, I get their names mixed up, here was my pronunciation issue. Tiffany could apply for a staff opening when that arises, and she'd be a great candidate for that, so that's my justification for that. And maybe that's a discussion we can have next time before, and do people that aren't, how do we see that in the future?
So our process is that the vice president is tasked by the board with reviewing the candidates and making a recommendation to the board. So that's the process that we followed. You can certainly revisit that if that's what you would like to change in the future.
You did great.
Yeah,
I think we're seeing the positions
priorities.
differently, yeah.
Any other discussion on this item?
I think the process should be changed. I didn't agree with making just one board member. That back when that was decided a number of years ago, I protested that. I didn't think it was the wise way to go. I still feel the same way. At the very least, a board member should be in on the interview process. These are board appointees. So I'll be voting no as well.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll call for a vote. And that does pass with 3 in favor, 2 opposed. Next item on the agenda is the project acceptance for October 2015, which was the relocation of the fire hydrant in front of Arrowhead Elementary to meet current code. This is an information item. Any questions on this?
So to relocate, I have
Yeah, crazy. All right, next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Under board reports and communications.
I have 2 future agenda items I'd like to, if anyone else has one first, take me a minute to get to that.
I don't want to put anything on any future agenda. All the time I provide.
So I recognize that the middle school task force is looking at the different models with the subcommittee regarding the differentiated classroom and challenge and other models that they may be looking at. But I would like to put on the agenda a study session for challenge for the following reasons. I feel like at this point, since there is so much dialogue out there in the community, it would be good. I feel like I don't have clear information, and I feel it would be good to have a discussion so that we can ask questions, or a study session. What are the current models that we're looking at? Even like we did with the principal evaluation, if we had a PowerPoint presentation or something given to us of what are the different models we're looking at, where, I know you've told us where we're at in the process. And then,
still on that topic?
Yes.
Oh,
I was
okay.
reading my notes. Did you have something?
While you look, would
Yes.
you mind? I actually
Oh, I know what I was
attended.
gonna say.
Oh, go ahead.
We got this chart in our board briefing that tells the breakdown, and this is another reason why I wanted to have this as a discussion item, that tells the breakdown of actually how many challenge classes we have in each school versus how many non-challenge classes that we have in each school. So for example, at Canyon Park Junior High, there is let's look for which grade. There's like two challenge science classes and 4 non-challenge science classes for a given grade approximately, and that changes between the grades and between the schools. But there's less, my point in that is there's less challenge classes than there are regular classes. So if we have between 100 and 125 kids in non-challenge classes, to me that seems already differentiated, because not all the kids in the non-challenge, out of that 125 kids, there's bright ones, there's ones that are struggling, there's motivated students, there's not motivated students. So I think I'm getting confused on why the classes that are non-challenge we don't consider differentiated already or heterogeneous. Because those classes seem heterogeneous when you have 125 kids approximately per grade in non-challenge classes. Because you're going to have kids of all levels out of 125 students. So would like to have a future discussion about this, because I have some questions like that, and I just think, I need clarification, and our community needs clarification.
So this is not currently under consideration by the board. That's what the message that I have been communicating to people who have emailed. It is in our task forces right now. They're studying it, and the timeline, I'll just remind you in case you're not aware of it. The timeline is that they are studying it now. The subcommittees are looking at it. They make a recommendation to the committee makes a recommendation to the board, and there is opportunity during that time for community input. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you are asking for a study session to go on the agenda for board involvement before the task force actually makes their recommendation.
Yes. And whether that's we get a PowerPoint presentation like we did which was very informative with the principal evaluations. I would like to see where are we at? What are we looking at? What are the different models?
So last week, Dawn and I were able to attend the parent meeting about challenge, which was very helpful to hear all the details of all the questions people had. And then I also asked for the time, and I was able to attend, although unfortunately only part of the subcommittee meeting today from the middle school grade reconfiguration task force. And I was able to, it helps for me to witness the process for when I'm going through such a large and complicated issue. And something that came up in the subcommittee meeting was the fact that the research that we've asked the UW Department of Education, if I said that right, I sound like it was a federal office, but no. Well, but the question that we posed to them was what is the best practice of a challenging and rigorous education for all middle school students? It was a very broad question. And so I agree with you. I think we do, as a board, need to have a study session and get details. But I personally would want to wait until that information comes back and then the task force goes through that information. I don't know if there is as solid a recommendation as we had thought, or it seems to me it's very, and this is just my opinion, trying to learn as much as I can. There seems to be people at different stages in the process going on, and I think for us to come together as a board to talk about the issue as a board is one thing. Like I felt the need to learn more about it myself, and I would encourage anyone to go sit in on that subcommittee meeting. It was very helpful to see all the different people in the room and how they were tackling the issue. But as a board, for us to talk about it, I think it would be advantageous for us to wait for it to become less less of a 30,000 foot question and start to get more specific in terms of what the task force is outputting. I agree there's a lot of confusion, a lot of questions out there, and I think there's ways that as a district we can talk about it, but as a board, when we start to tackle a problem, that usually means we're towards the end. And from what I saw today when I was in that subcommittee meeting, I don't think we're there. So that research is that output from UW is supposed to come back December. It's not that far away. And so perhaps at that time it'd be a good time to talk about when would be the best time for us to get together and really could, point in the past has been, let's make the best use of our time when we do have meetings. So having it timed well when we really have information together that's solid to discuss, I think is the best way to do it. And we can talk, maybe talk about, January, February, kind of get something penciled into the study session and then reevaluate maybe as we get closer, just make sure we have enough. I think that would be a good idea. But
I just think that this is a big issue, right? I hear what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I'm not in disagreement, but I think that it's like the kindergarten. A lot of the questions we've had about kindergarten, if we're brought in and up to speed in the beginning, I think it alleviates a decision being made and us coming back behind and saying, no, we as a board don't agree with this, or asking all these questions that we could have asked up front. And we are representing the community, and I feel like we have insight to things that we're hearing. I would like to hear where we're at with it. And I could sit on the subcommittee meetings and do that, but I don't know that that's my responsibility to do that. I think it's my responsibility to get the information. So, from the administrators.
The information comes from the task force after they complete their work, and we haven't given them an opportunity to complete their work yet.
Right, I understand, but I'd like to know what is the task force actually looking at? What models? What have they been tasked with? And also be able to present any questions that we might have at the time. And be able to get them clarified. And I understand we don't know where this end goal is. And the board also, my understanding is, I wasn't on the board at the time, but the board was the ones that tasked the district with starting challenge.
Well, I thought it was it's apropos that Todd Banks came tonight. I remember the conversations clearly that occurred about challenge courses, and what was decreasing at the time became not popular with our community, and our community started saying, no, we need these back. As a matter of fact, you're removing more and more of them. So we did, and we increased, as I recall, that we were limiting students to one classroom per junior high. And we increased that. I recall that there was a statement made by Dr. O'Keefe, well, we can increase them to 2 classrooms, but the board said we'd like to see it increase to the capacity that exists at all of the schools. Having done that, there was a cut score for students to get into the high cap or honors courses that was done away with by the board, because we wanted students who just missed that to be able to challenge themselves, hence the name challenge. And so those challenge courses were very, the board had their hands on that project. So to do away with that without answering some of the questions we heard tonight concerns me greatly. What action, if any, is going to go on from the, I don't remember which one it was, gave us a list of questions. I believe the first speaker, wasn't it? Yeah, Angie Hancock gave us a list of really great questions. We were both at that meeting on the 22nd, Director Cast and I, and we heard a lot of questions. We saw them creating the papers that they held up that they're no longer here with. And so where does that go into the process? And I think that ignoring those kind of things is not the way to go. So to the major question of having yet another meeting thrown on my schedule, which I've already clearly said I'm not in favor of, I would support this because I believe that we are the ones that are representing the community and specifically the students in North Shore. And if these things aren't getting answered or aren't getting dealt with, if we're looking at just one option only, I think that that's just brewing for trouble.
Okay, I have to weigh in. So first of all, just want to make sure that we get our definitions right. The challenge is not honors, that the AAP program is not going away, that that's required by law, and that still will be here. Sometimes that gets muddled in the community, that conversation, and certainly if we need to have some more explanation so that we understand the difference between the two. That's good. So, how to explain where my brain is at? And obviously, like everyone, I'm hearing from the two sides. And I'm wondering why there are two sides. Why has this become a binary conversation of all challenge or no challenge? And I'm not sure how that we've come to that point. And I'm worried that we as a board are perpetuating that binary conversation, or maybe that's not where we need to be. And so I guess how I got here is, I look at our high school model of IB and AP and college in the high school and all these amazing rigorous programs that our philosophy is everybody gets to take those, that you don't test into them, and we encourage and we are promoting students taking those. And I'm not hearing from anybody that that's bad, right? Everybody seems to think that's a good thing. And then nobody is coming to us saying that 6-year-olds need to be in college prep mode and pushing themselves in rigor, and it's about the whole child and kids learning how to be with other kids, and I mean all of that, right? And so somewhere clearly there's a transition where we move from that kids learning how to get along and playing well in the sandbox, for lack of a better word, that transitions to that mode that you get in high school, and obviously that transition seems to happen right around those middle school levels. So can we stay in that philosophy of it's a transition era, and there's some opportunities, maybe it's 8th grade, where we're saying to kids, all right, you need to start thinking about pushing yourself in pre-AB and accessing something, and maybe not at 6th grade where it's already not anyways, or it's a certain subjects or whatever, or just having the conversation like we were asked of why are free and reduced lunch kids not accessing it? Why are Hispanic kids not asking it? Is it an ability, or is it just a lack of conversations at home? And I, in my geeky way, did the math, and our boys are vastly underrepresented in the English and social studies. Math and science very equal for girls and boys, but why are boys not choosing to push themselves in English and social studies? So having those questions, I think, is a much more valuable use of our time as we move to middle school, rather than this all or nothing conversation that we've been having. So that's where I'm at.
I would agree strongly with Sandy. There shouldn't be two sides. Currently, there's only one thing being looked at. So if there's only one thing being looked at, that kind of creates that conflict.
And I don't know, my question is, I don't know what's being looked at. So that's why
right.
I had, in the conversations with the board, this came up several times. And I don't mean that dismissively, that I don't know what's being looked at. I know people are working very hard, but I'm not clear. And in the conversations with the board when this came up, I assured several people that had come there, community members, that there's been no decision made to get rid of challenge. There's been no decision made. And several of those community members said, and you know, they're people who had been to the ED or to the middle school task force and listened to what was being told, and they were telling me I was wrong, essentially, and that I don't know what's going on, and they weren't being rude, they were just saying you don't know. So I'm being caught off guard. I want to know. I would like us to be able to have an update. Where are we? Have a board discussion about it. Where are we now? And I understand no decision's been made, but what are we tasking the subcommittee to look at? Here's the models. I keep hearing about all the models that, for example, with the University of Washington, the question that came to my mind today is, from what I read, is we've showed them, what I understood it to read, is we've showed the University of Washington 4 different models and asked them to look at those, and I'm not sure if that's right or not, but that's how I read it. And I'm like, well, what models does that include? And so I'm feeling, what I'm wanting is for the board to be to be updated on the discussion and to be able to ask our questions at that time to get clarification.
So it's not in terms of having a meeting, in terms of setting direction, because the analogy
I'm
to
not asking to set
well, no.
direction, I'm asking to know where we're at.
Wait, let me finish. Because the analogy to kindergarten came up. So that's where I was thinking where we were asked to set direction.
Yeah, no,
And that's why I was thinking it was much too early in the process for that.
No, what I appreciate that Larry did, and this was, you know, that became more direction than I realized that we were gaining at the time, but what I appreciate that you did, Larry, is bring us into the conversation early on, and you know, for the past several weeks you've said, here's where we are, we need to look at this, and I just felt that that was collaborative and we were working together, and I felt really empowered and felt like I could empower community members even though there might be different views on it, because I knew where we were at.
So I have an idea. Perhaps we could make a request. So Heather was able at the last PTSA Connections Luncheon to give a presentation that gave a status on exactly that work. So, and it wasn't all that long. Perhaps it's something that we could ask if she would have time to come to a you know, soon to be had study session, if we could amend that on to give us an update similar to what was.
And I would just
That's
differentiate between the kindergarten question, which we don't have a task force for, and the middle school task force, which is working on this issue at present. So they're 2 distinct issues, and
two
how you
different-
choose to
two
move
different
forward with that,
timelines.
I
I'm
think.
sure.
It was
Can I just
more-
finish, Kimberly?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think the question is, what is the task force, I mean, what are we asking them to do? And whether or not we're gonna let them do their work, or whether or not this is a decision that the board wants to make at this point. So maybe I'm misunderstanding what
Not
you're
asking to
asking.
make a decision, I thought I was clear about that. I said like the principal evaluations, that's what I likened it to.
Right, but see, there's no task force working on that. That's the distinction that I'm asking you to consider.
For one would be happy to make a decision at this point.
I want it.
Okay,
Yeah. But I mean, but I think an update, you know, because of all the information going around, I think an update could be helpful. You know, similar to what
so
Heather was
too.
able to give.
I think your suggestion was valid.
Yeah, and I'm apologizing, I'm realizing that I was also at the luncheon with you, and so I have that information that was presented. Do we want to start with just having the PowerPoint?
That'd be great.
Put in
And then
the
if
board
I can
briefing.
ask, if we have questions, we can ask clarification at the time where it's an appropriate time to be discussing it. And we can't have these meetings behind closed doors, so I would like to have the meeting as is appropriate with the board in a public setting,
Right.
so that our community members can attend and hear it if they so choose, and so I can be informed, so I'm not giving misinformation, because I'm trying not to give any information right now, because I'm not quite sure, fully feel in the loop of it. So I'm trying to balance this,
Right.
and it would be nice to get an update.
So, yeah, I agree, and
What models are we looking at? And
I'm kind of thinking of the timing of all this, so why don't we start by having the PowerPoint put in the board briefing so that at least we all have the same information and we're all operating off the same page, and then because we have elections and all that change, then we can talk about what's the best time to have clarifying questions.
like, I would like to, I'm fine with having a board briefing, but I would like to have it as a public discussion so that the public.
I'm saying
Okay.
that once we've got that and we're all on the same page, then we can say, all right, when would be the best time? Do we do it with the 2 board members leaving in 4 weeks, or do we do it when we have the 2 new board members on?
I have a question. Heather, did you just read the PowerPoint, or did you have things you said pertinent to the PowerPoint?
PowerPoint, plus there was certainly notes and conversation as I was going through the PowerPoint.
I would just draw your attention to a 3-page memo that
I
kind of
remember
provided,
that.
that was in last week's briefing, and so in addition, kind of piggybacking on Sandy's comment, in addition to providing the PowerPoint, I might ask that you review that memo in perhaps greater detail than maybe your initial weekend read would have provided. And if there are additional questions that you have that come out of your reading of that memo, I think it would be helpful to know what specifically you're asking about. The memo speaks to the work at the UW College of Education, what they'll be looking at. It speaks to the questions that are guiding the academic task force. It speaks to the role of AAP and how math is being viewed as fitting in with the middle school model. So I think it perhaps would be, rather than recreating what we've already created, maybe if you go through those and if that's not answering your questions adequately, then perhaps you can ask more detailed questions, and so we can respond to those at the level that's comfortable for you.
Actually, I did read it, and I highlighted sections of it, and I left it at home. But there is one that, well, and I apologize. I grabbed my papers and it wasn't on top of them. But there was one that specifically gave direction to either the task force or the subcommittee to look at one thing, and that was the "this we believe" philosophy. And it didn't give direction to look at anything else.
You can put my screen on, so I've
Thank
got
you.
the memo pulled up here. So this is from the second of the third page of the memo, so it speaks to the subcommittee is what their focus is, what questions they're looking at.
So it seems that Director D'Angelo did not receive this.
It wasn't in my briefing, because I get mine in the mail.
But could you,
So does
I had
Director
2
McCreary.
copies of a couple other things, so that might have been reviewed.
So I would just point out the last bullet there, it speaks to if components of the challenge model were retained. So to me, that suggests that it's not the binary conversation. I really liked, Sandy, I really liked your description, because I think we are in a binary conversation about a non-binary topic. So I think that, to me, suggests that there's an open dialogue occurring within the task force and within the subcommittee that is not excluding or moving particular items off the table.
I can't scroll this. It was before that.
I can scroll.
Thank you. Hold on.
So this speaks to
No.
AAP,
Keep going.
math trajectory.
I think it was before that. Here it is, the second sentence. The subcommittee began meeting in June 2015 to begin researching how to provide a challenging curriculum for all related to the use of heterogeneous groups. That was their task. And it doesn't say various things at that point. It says that was its charge, to only look at heterogeneous groups, according to this document. And I do appreciate you scrolling down to the bullet points. If you scroll up a little further, it gives the 4 essential attributes. And in those, I'm finding it difficult to understand why this conversation is even going on when empowering and equitable clearly state providing all students with the knowledge and skills they need to take control of their lives, and advocating for all students' rights to learn and providing challenging and relevant learning opportunities. It seems like the challenge courses would fit both of those to me. So it's a little confusing, as you say, if the task force is looking at a variety of things, then why was the charge solely to look at heterogeneous groups?
Remember the next slide, it
So-
says the
right.
clarification there?
Right, so if you go back to that sentence you pointed out, Dawn, the next line, the task force, so they had a discussion recently
Clarification.
to clarify their charge, and then everything that follows relates to the outcome of that conversation.
Okay, so they will be, if you keep scrolling down then to your original screen, they will be looking at the challenge model and how best to incorporate it. Okay, I see your heads nodding. Thank you.
And I,
If I have further questions, I'm
Please.
sorry.
You know, that's
If I have further questions on this, because I highlighted quite a few things that concern me about this and concern me about what I was hearing in the community, what I heard at the community meeting about challenge courses, and I'll be glad to share them. But what is equally concerning is that we have a list of questions right here. Is anything happening with those?
Those are the questions that are guiding the work of the academic subcommittee.
We have a list of questions
Oh,
that
I'm sorry.
Angie Hancock presented it to us this evening. And I mean, these are some good questions, and what I would like to see is these kinds of things addressed.
so
And perhaps then we won't have a bipolar conversation going on.
and to
Binary.
binary, and
That's
to,
not-
I know, right, not bipolar. And to try to pull it out of the binary, I'll be careful not to, now I'm gonna say bipolar and slip up, but binary conversation, you know, a recurring theme, if this is helpful, that I heard at the parent meeting, there were 2 things that stuck with me, and these are at the 30,000 foot level, so I think they're appropriate, and the first thing is overall is that the challenge program is very treasured, you know, which is not to be underestimated. It's definitely very treasured, and that's something. And you know, I was making notes to get specific. What about it is treasured? Because I think that might be the more insightful information. But definitely that it's treasured, and that would be the reason for these questions. And the one that I heard recurrently that I think you referred to, John, was the why. And so I think for those, this is an unusual situation because this is so treasured. Usually at this point in a task force, you know, I'm so process driven. I'm all about, you know, following the process and respecting it. And I've been trying to answer a question myself: is why are these questions coming up so early in the process when we haven't gotten to the outcome of the recommendation? And I think it's because of the amount of respect and value that families have found in the program, which is really a compliment, really. And so explaining into why, I think the clarifications that are documented in here about the focus on the following questions gets into more details that will be helpful to families. But that question of why kept coming up at that parent meeting. Why, you know, why? And so I think helping folks understand that, even though we're early in the process and typically we don't, you know, usually we try to let the task force dig through the details and then come out with its outcome. But, you know, just things that you brought up, Sandy, you know, why are boys not taking advantage of so many challenge? You know, why are some groups, you know, what are things that we might be looking to improve? You know, I think that would be helpful for people to understand. And so to get back to your questions, Kimberly, here are some questions that keep bouncing around, and unfortunately, because this is early in the process, typically we don't have that information ready till a little later, but maybe we need to shift a little bit.
And I think with any of these task force where there's major decisions, even the later start, everybody knows I'm 100% for later start. The later the better. I love that my daughter starts school at 9:10, but it doesn't matter. I think we should still be having updates and discussion, not discussion on making action items, but discussion about where are we at, where are we going, and at least be updated on that. And right now we're having a discussion, it's not on the agenda. I asked for it to be on the agenda a few times now, and this is a robust discussion that probably helps all of us. Instead of in the 11th hour after we get a recommendation, we're all kind of, at least myself, feeling, now that's not necessarily appropriate time to ask all the questions either. And while I don't mind posing questions to you guys and to Larry, I also do have this, gauge that our community should be part of hearing those questions too. So I understand that I can send some questions over, but I also feel I should be asking, some of these questions in public and not just dialoguing off the record.
We're not off the record, we're on
I'm
the
not
record.
now.
And
I'm talking about it.
and I appreciate the hijacking of the future agenda items. So,
We have the study session.
Yeah, I don't think we got clarity on what exactly is going to take place surrounding this request.
I'll try to sum up. So definitely the forwarding of the PowerPoint from the Connections Luncheon and the board briefing, just so we're all on the same page. The timing with new board members coming on is tricky. I just pulled out a board planner I had in here. We don't have an open study session until January. So we did not come to a resolution about whether or not we were going to add on to another study session.
And I don't think it needs to be done tomorrow. I think we need to have it on our agenda so we can, in a month from now, or, I'd rather have it sooner rather than later. But recognizing all the different things that we have coming up, and we're flipping boards, that it might be wise to have the new board members a part of that discussion.
So just so you know, the study session right after the new board members that day is about the final boundary plan, which I'm sure will be a long discussion. So that date will be
Is that the
pretty, that's the 24th,
That's the
November
day I'm
24th.
not here.
That's the day you're not here,
Yes.
Kimberly. So the next day session isn't until December 8th, and that's full of 4 performance measures.
And then again, maybe the first week in November, I know that the people that are running from the board come to these meetings anyway, so.
So how about if we tentatively plan for an update with either the academic subcommittee or with the full middle school grade reconfiguration task force on January 12th, which is our next open study session. And I would just want to condition that on that we've received the research information from the University of Washington, and the task force, the full task force and or the subcommittee has had some time to process that information so they could speak with some level of precision to it with the board. How does that sound?
When is the recommendation supposed to come to us? What was I know you just said it, Janet, but.
March, wasn't it?
Early 2016, they're still in the middle of the discussion, and I don't think they are as far as they expected to be. Is that
It's
your
early, like
assessment?
January or springtime?
Oh, spring.
Okay.
When do we anticipate the subcommittee and the task force bringing recommendations?
Well, we wanted to community engagement.
Right.
And then community in January,
Right.
then we get that back, process it, determine if we want to make a recommendation, get further community engagement. So it could be March, April.
Jan, that date in January is good. I think that would be good to have this discussion before the community engagement. But I understand what you're saying after we have some of the other data.
All right,
January 12th?
We'll move forward and we'll plan on that.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. All right, next item on the agenda is the,
I'm sorry. This isn't, I think it's an important question for the board was brought to the mic this evening. The website says the school board has approved the pursuit of funding through a 2018 bond measure for construction of school facilities on the Maltby site. I don't recall voting on a resolution for that.
That was part of the EDTF recommendation. I think it was bullet 2.
And so, did we vote on that EDTF recommendation?
So similar to the North Creek High School where we did some of the planning and the design portion of it ahead of the actual bond.
Yeah, so if you actually want to, I think, pull me up here.
I don't think that that's the same thing.
This
but
was an action
thank
item
you.
on the February 23rd board meeting. Was it
That's the
from
Maltby
board?
site thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. So similar to the way that we did it with the North Creek High School, where some of the design elements were done in advance, we authorized the admin to, in order to capitalize on the time, to do some of that same work in advance of the 2018 bond. And that's what this is referring to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is board member reports. We have Kimberly first.
So I had the honor of watching the Kokanee Student Council, because my daughter sits on student council, get to give their speeches for running for office. And it was like, I was so impressed with these 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And I thought I was just gonna run in and run out, and I ended up sitting through most of it because it was just amazing. So I was really impressed with the kind of kids that we have that are running for office and maybe sitting in our place someday. And then went to see Andy Hill with Sandy and Larry. So that was good conversation.
Amy.
So on 14th, I attended an EDTF meeting. Just always a great group of people to watch it work, for sure. Then on the 19th, attended the PTSA Connections Luncheon, which I can't say enough about either. I think it's a great way of having two-way dialogue with PTA boards across the district. I'm so glad we're able to do that. On the 20th, the Wellington visit, and then touring the construction of North Creek High School on the evening of the 22nd, which was a Seahawks football game. There were still 50 people in the room for the Challenge Parents meeting, which I tried to make sure to applaud their dedication for coming to the meeting. And then today was able to, like I mentioned, sit in on the academic subcommittee meeting for the middle school grade reconfiguration task force.
Formative. All right, Sandy.
Okay, so most of it's already been mentioned, the meetings with Representatives Springer and Stanford and Senator Hill, the ESD listening tour. They did a very nice job of listening. They had some challenging speakers in the room. Wellington visit, PTA Connection Luncheon, also attended the Foundation Legacy Brunch. And that was a nice event. Attended the equity conversation at Shoreline City Hall, courageous conversations, very well done. So continuing with our training, along with Director Quinn. Went to Maud Pizza on opening day, where 100% of their proceeds benefited the North Shore Schools Foundation. So that, just a thank you to, again, a community partner working with the district. So we welcome them to the North Shore community. Attended the Washington State PTA Legislative Assembly in Olympia this weekend, and a huge shout out to Carrie McKenzie. She didn't do herself justice. That there were only 2 things that added to the legislative agenda for this coming session, and one was driven by our own Carrie. So congratulations to you, and thank you for the advocacy that you do for our kids. And then today attended the North Shore Performing Arts Foundation luncheon.
nice event there, and they had some term for it, but they're kind of scaling back and planning for next year, building for the following year. And then just a reminder to everyone that this week is All In for Kids. So if you get a phone call with that 408 number on it, it may not be the DNF report or a library book. It could in fact be the foundation, so answer the phone call.
Thank you, Sandy. Dawn?
Yes, I attended the Wellington tour on October 20th, and I would just like to ask a favor of Dr. O'Keefe. If you would share the video that you took of me dancing Thriller with the students.
I sent it to Leanna.
Oh, okay. Hannah has it. Okay. My husband would like to see it. He says that I'm just poetry in motion, I'm sure. Would like to get his eyes on that video. You know, he lives in Pittsburgh, and so those things just sound great. I also, well, he just liked to see me dance in Thriller. The kids would too, I'm sure. I also got to sing the national anthem. Impromptu, and the first line, of course, contains my name, which is an important part of the national anthem. And so all the students in that classroom know that. I attended the community meeting about challenge courses. Crowd, standing room only for those of us who were slightly late, and a very large crowd of community. I attended the legislative committee meeting, my last legislative committee meeting, October 23rd and 24th in Olympia, and talked to a number of school directors from around the state, the ones on the committee, about challenge courses, among other things. Bellevue is apparently moving towards challenge courses. Federal Way has instituted, or is in plans to institute, an entire AP middle school. So I heard a lot from other directors around the state about increasing challenge in their districts. I also, because our committee got out early, was able to attend the Legislative Assembly for PTA. I saw Sandy there. I saw a number of people there, got lots of hugs, and I heard various speakers, and just missed, but was informed as I walked in the door by Janice Kutsera that Sherry Kranick was awarded the state level PTA Outstanding Advocate Award, which is huge, and very proud of Sherry, and went to the after celebration and sat by Sherry and visited while we all celebrated Robin McKenzie's birthday. Well, that's it.
All right, thank you, Dawn.
Oh, on our calendar is NSF having an event right in the middle of the CPAC event? And is it at the CPAC event, or is it in conflict?
The MOBACs. It's
Right.
at
They're both
yeah,
the
from
same
11
day.
to 1,
Same
it's on the
day.
same day. Yeah, it does have to be the same day.
That was not really good planning.
They're both all the events, you can shop
Yeah,
at
you
both
can-
places.
They're drop in, drop out events.
I intend to shop both. No problem, I couldn't have moved.
So let's see, you've already heard, somebody has mentioned all of the things that I've been to as well. Just if you get an opportunity to tour North Creek High School, I know Sandy you already have, it is amazing, and Eric McDowell is really the right person for that, for what he's doing. He's just very excited and very generous with his time and sharing it. So, the only notes that I have are the NSBA conference registration opens tomorrow. Kimberly, I think you're the only one that has indicated that you are planning to attend or interested in attending. And then the coordination meeting, I have Amy, according to my notes, on November 4th. Yeah,
Just,
Amy and myself.
I'm in hyper